My name is Kyle. I work as the executive assistant to the president at Central Corporation. My personality, which keeps my emotions hidden, was highly valued and led me to my current position. One day, the president, Mr. Yates, called me and asked me to join an important meeting with a key client, International Tech Corporation. This company is a multinational organization, and the negotiators come from various nationalities. Mr. Yates speaks some English, but it's only at a conversational level. A translator was essential. On the day of the meeting, as we entered the conference room, the atmosphere was friendly, and small talk began. However, a casual joke from one of the representatives suddenly caused a misunderstanding, and the tension rose sharply. "What do you mean by that?" one person asked angrily, and another retorted, "It's just a joke. Don't take it so seriously." The mood quickly turned sour, and an emotional debate erupted. Fingers were pointed, and people started shouting at each other. Not only English but German, French, Spanish, and Italian were being spoken, turning the conference room into a battleground. Mr. Yates, visibly frustrated and confused, tried to calm everyone down in Japanese, saying, "Please, everyone, calm down," but it had no effect. Realizing that the deal could collapse and that this would result in a major loss for Central Corporation, I decided to take a bold step and raised my voice. "Hey!" I shouted, and everyone turned to look at me in surprise. The room fell silent, and the tension dissipated. I am Kyle, 26 years old. Currently, I work as the executive assistant to the president at Central Corporation. I may look like an ordinary guy, but I have a peculiar trait. It's that I don't show emotions on my face. Even when I'm angry or sad, I feel it inside, but it never shows on the outside. As a result, people often see me as a calm or cold person. But that's a big misunderstanding because, inside, I'm overflowing with emotions just like everyone else. It's just that they don't show on my face. Because of this, I've had many unpleasant experiences since I was a child. In kindergarten, tag was a popular game in our class. One day, I was it and was chasing after the other kids with all my energy. I was having so much fun, but apparently, my face didn't reflect that at all. A friend told me about it later. At the time, I was chasing a girl when she suddenly burst into tears, and somehow, I ended up getting scolded. The teacher ran over and said, "Kyle, don't scare the other kids. You shouldn't chase them with such a face." But I was just playing. I tried to explain. But the teacher didn't understand at all. In the end, I got scolded for just playing, and I felt so frustrated that I started crying. "No, you're wrong. I was just playing tag." In elementary school, our class pet goldfish passed away due to illness. Its name was Sparky, and it was everyone's favorite. Taking care of it was something I looked forward to every day, but one day, it suddenly stopped moving. The teacher and all my classmates cried as we said goodbye to Sparky. "Sparky, thank you. Goodbye." My friend said, wiping away tears, and it broke my heart. "Why don't we bury Sparky in the backyard?" the teacher suggested, and we all headed there. We dug a small hole with a shovel and gently buried Sparky. "Kyle, if you have something you'd like to say, please do," the teacher prompted me. I nodded silently and whispered, "Thank you, Sparky," but my expression didn't change at all. "Kyle, you're not crying at all, even though Sparky is gone," a classmate said in surprise. "Yeah, why are you so cold?" another added. "No, I'm sad too. I just can't cry," I thought to myself but couldn't say it out loud. Inside, I was crying just like everyone else, but on the outside, I appeared indifferent. Since then, I started being treated as I were heartless. Whenever others were chatting happily, they often grew quiet the moment I approached. I frequently overheard classmates whispering, "Kyle is so hard to read. He always seems so cold." Every day, I silently lamented, "Why doesn't anyone understand me?" Still, I couldn't change my expression, so all I could do was quietly wait for time to pass. During middle and high school, whenever we had events like sports days or school festivals, I was genuinely enjoying myself inside. But apparently, I always looked disinterested from the outside. Kyle, you're making that cold face again. Such a buzzkill, a classmate would joke. I would silently protest in my mind, that's not true. I'm having fun too, but I couldn't bring myself to say it aloud. During the sports day, I ran as hard as I could for my class, thinking I was giving it my all. But I could still feel the cold stares from my classmates. The same thing happened at the school festival. Even though I worked hard on preparing the play and exhibits, I often heard comments like, "Kyle, can't you look a little more excited?" I felt like I was enjoying it from the bottom of my heart, but that emotion never showed on my face. Why is it just me who gets seen this way? I often asked myself, over and over. Even the shock and frustration I felt didn't show on my face, so no one understood how I truly felt. I started to resent my inability to show emotions and grew frustrated with the unchangeable nature of myself. That was how I spent my childhood, and even after entering college, things didn't improve. As I interacted with more people, my inability to express emotions outwardly caused frequent difficulties in friendships and relationships. Despite that, I worked hard, focusing on learning languages and studying to better myself. When I graduated from college and got the job at my current company, I resolved to make a fresh start. Being an executive assistant was a new challenge for me, and I believed it was a chance to test my abilities. I even started thinking that my unemotional demeanor might be an asset in staying calm under pressure. Slowly, I began to feel more optimistic. One day, as I was organizing Mr. Yates's schedule as usual, my phone rang while I was reviewing detailed arrangements and messages. It was Mr. Yates. "Yes, this is Kyle. Kyle, can you come to my office? There's something I want to share with you." "Understood. I'll be there right away." After hanging up, I quickly tidied up my desk, grabbed my notebook and pen, and headed to his office. I knocked on the door and entered quietly. Mr. Yates was talking with a woman. "Well, I'll get back to work now," the woman said in a cheerful voice. "Sure. Think over what we discussed earlier," Mr. Yates replied warmly. The woman was Alice, the president's daughter, and she was my age. She worked in the accounting department to learn about the company's financial operations. When our eyes met, Alice gave a small smile and nodded politely. I returned the gesture with a quiet bow. Sitting deeply in his chair, Mr. Yates looked a bit tired as he spoke. "Sorry for calling you in so suddenly." Hearing that, I instinctively opened my notebook and prepared to take notes. "You're aware of the plan to acquire International Tech Corporation's business, right?" His voice carried a sense of determination. "Yes, I am." I nodded quietly. International Tech Corporation was one of Central Corporation's business partners, and as part of their organizational restructuring, Central Corporation had agreed to take over their business as the primary buyer. What I'm about to discuss is an update on that. Mr. Yates continued. His voice lowered slightly. "It seems that International Tech Corporation has requested group negotiations. They likely have many concerns about changes to working conditions and employment rules. So they probably want to address everything thoroughly in advance." I replied to Mr. Yates's words. Group negotiations themselves are natural, but issues that arise during the process need to be addressed. "That's right. Exactly. I want to prepare so the negotiations go as smoothly as possible." Mr. Yates continued, his expression growing slightly troubled. He let out a deep sigh and muttered, "Language barriers are really a struggle. International Tech Corporation is a foreign company with employees from various nationalities. Negotiating with their union would inevitably involve multinational representatives. They all speak English, but I'm worried about whether we can communicate effectively and alleviate their concerns," he said, furrowing his brow. "You're right. With a multinational counterpart, cultural and language differences can lead to misunderstandings," I agreed. Language barriers can be a major obstacle in group negotiations. That's why we need to prepare carefully to ensure the negotiations go smoothly. Kyle, can you double-check the schedule? Mr. Yates asked. Understood, I replied, opening my notebook to review the schedule and mentally organizing the next steps. When Mr. Yates finished speaking inside, I left his office. As I stepped out, the hallway was still quiet, with barely anyone around. I walked ahead while reviewing the upcoming plans. As I moved forward, Mr. Yates's words lingered in my mind. Negotiating with a multinational group is no easy task. Even so, I reminded myself that my purpose here is to overcome such challenges. Walking down the hall, I began solidifying a plan in my mind. While reconfirming the schedule and organizing the necessary preparations, I thought about the best ways to lead this critical negotiation to success. On the day of the meeting with International Tech Corporation, I accompanied Mr. Yates to a rented conference room. When we entered, the union representatives from International Tech Corporation were already gathered. As expected, the group from International Tech Corporation was very multinational. Although Mr. Yates could speak some English, his conversational level meant smooth communication largely depended on me. Mr. Yates stepped forward and began his greeting. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today's meeting is a critical step in building mutual understanding and fostering a positive relationship. I translated his words into English for the International Tech Corporation representatives. The atmosphere in the room was a bit tense, but everyone nodded at Mr. Yates's words, and the mood eased slightly. After the introductions and small talk, the meeting began in earnest, with countless documents, laptops, and a projector at the ready. The discussion first addressed the concerns of International Tech Corporation employees working in the division slated for acquisition by Central Corporation. Mr. Yates turned to the representatives from International Tech Corporation and asked, "What concerns do you have?" I translated the question into English. One of the representatives spoke up, saying, "We're worried about significant changes to our working conditions." As we delved deeper, it became clear that they had an image of Japanese people working without breaks. They were worried that, with Central Corporation acquiring the business, they might be forced into such a working style. Many of them held the fixed notion that Japanese work culture is harsh. Hearing this, Mr. Yates maintained a calm expression and said, "At our company, we value our employees. I assure you that this will never happen. Let's thoroughly discuss these concerns and aim to create an even better working environment." I translated Mr. Yates's words into English. Then, with a slight smile, I added, "Only a few terrible managers enforce unfair work practices. Please don't worry." The representatives from International Tech Corporation seemed somewhat reassured by these words. As the meeting progressed, the representatives' expressions gradually softened with relief. Just as it seemed the discussions would proceed smoothly, an unexpected incident occurred. One of the International Tech Corporation representatives made a light-hearted joke, intending no harm. But it completely shifted the atmosphere in the room. The comment had no malice whatsoever, and it was merely a difference in values stemming from cultural differences. However, that one remark became a trigger, causing the other representatives' expressions to change and the tension in the room to escalate rapidly. One person, in a slightly irritated tone, asked, "What do you mean by that?" The original speaker, not wanting to back down, retorted, "It's just a joke. Don't take it so seriously." As these exchanges continued, the mood became increasingly strained. Sarcasm started flying back and forth, and the discussion gradually turned into an emotional confrontation. At first, the discussion was calm, but it gradually heated up, eventually escalating to the point where people stood up, pointing fingers at one another. "You're the one who said that," someone shouted, while another yelled, "Enough already." Shouts in English echoed throughout the room, soon accompanied by insults in various native languages. English, German, French, Spanish, and Italian merged into a chaotic mix of angry voices. Indeed, some of the remarks did contain malice. This only fueled the frustration further, escalating the situation into complete chaos. Yet, when I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror on the conference room wall, my face was completely expressionless. Though I felt a deep sense of anxiety internally, my outward calmness almost seemed to ground me. The representatives from International Tech Corporation continued arguing fiercely in their native languages. The room felt like a battlefield, with English, German, French, Spanish, and Italian flying in every direction. Unable to understand their words, Mr. Yates looked visibly frustrated and confused. He tried to calm the room in Japanese, saying, "Everyone, please settle down." But it had no effect. "Everyone, calm down," he shouted, raising his voice, but his words were drowned out by the commotion. Whether they couldn't hear him or didn't understand him, the representatives continued their heated arguments. If this continued, the acquisition negotiations would collapse, leaving only the restructuring of International Tech Corporation's operations. If that were to happen, it would be a significant loss for Central Corporation. Both Mr. Yates and the company itself would undoubtedly face a major crisis. Mr. Yates's expression grew tense, reflecting his growing concern. Realizing the futility of the situation, I made a bold decision to raise my voice. "Hey!" I shouted loudly, surprising even myself. I may have never shouted this emotionally in my entire life. The moment I raised my voice, everyone fell silent, turning to look at me in astonishment. The room was suddenly quiet, and the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Feeling their eyes on me, I began speaking in English. "Everyone, please calm down. If we let our emotions take over like this, we won't be able to accomplish anything." Choosing my words carefully, I continued, addressing everyone. "We are all here with a shared goal. This discussion isn't just for us, it's for the people we represent." As my words resonated, I could sense the tension gradually easing. I then repeated the same message in each of their native languages. First, I spoke in German. Next, I addressed them in French, Italian, and finally, Spanish. With each language, I noticed their expressions changing little by little. Eventually, they began nodding in agreement, and the tension in the room started to dissipate. Then, I reported to Mr. Yates in Japanese. I told everyone to calm down. He nodded with satisfaction and said, "Thank you, Kyle." Altogether, I conveyed the message in 6 languages, including English and Japanese, capturing the nuances to ensure everyone understood. Those who had been arguing sat back down, apologizing quietly as they did. Still, a slight awkwardness lingered in the air. Although most of them had regained their composure, traces of emotional tension remained. Mr. Yates scanned the room and spoke. "It seems we're no longer in the right mood to hold calm and productive discussions today." I added, "Yes, everyone likely needs time to cool their heads." Mr. Yates addressed the group with a suggestion. "Let's reschedule and meet again on another day with the same purpose in mind." Everyone agreed to this proposal, and the meeting was adjourned. Relieved that the situation had been resolved without further escalation, I left the venue. On the way back in the car, I sat at the wheel, feeling the tension gradually lift. In the back seat, Mr. Yates gazed out the window, then spoke suddenly. "I must say, I was truly surprised today. I knew you were strong in English, but I didn't expect you to be fluent in German and French too. You're a true polyglot." Keeping my eyes on the road ahead, I responded calmly. "It's an honor to receive your praise, Mr. Yates." Mr. Yates chuckled and said, "Your language skills are remarkable, but you studied in Japan, didn't you? Did you go on a short-term study abroad program?" For a moment, memories from my past came to mind as I replied. "Yes, I've had some short-term study abroad experiences. However, that's not all. I've had various opportunities to learn." Looking intrigued, Mr. Yates continued, "I see. I'm truly impressed by your language skills, calm judgment, and how you handle today's situation. Do you have any special methods for studying languages?" I smiled slightly before answering. Well, I began recounting my story, reflecting on my childhood. When I was in the early years of elementary school, I often played alone, unable to make many friends. I spent my days reading books in the corner of the classroom or catching insects at the edge of the schoolyard. One thing that fascinated me, however, was watching English language educational programs on TV. Every evening, I would sit in front of the TV in the living room, staring intently at the screen and muttering English phrases under my breath. Noticing this, my mother said, "Maybe Kyle has an interest in languages. Kyle, would you like to try attending an English conversation class?" My mother suggested this to me. I accepted her offer and started attending a children's English conversation school. Though I was nervous at first, I gradually became captivated by the fun of learning English. After class, I would return home to read English textbooks and novels. Each time I encountered new words or expressions in the books, I felt an excitement that was hard to describe. By the time I entered middle school, I had developed an interest in other languages beyond English. One day, while watching a movie, I heard dialogue in German and Italian. I was mesmerized by how beautiful they sounded and immediately began learning those languages. Kyle, do you enjoy studying so many languages? My mother once asked me curiously. It's so much fun, I replied. That simple answer summed up everything I felt. Around the time I finished high school entrance exams, I was playing a horror video game and realized the enemies were speaking Spanish. In that moment, my curiosity about Spanish was piqued, and I began learning it as well. Kyle, you really like taking on so many challenges. My father once said this, impressed. For me, learning languages was an adventure, a key to opening doors to new worlds. This passion for languages continued throughout my school years. When I entered college and had more free time, I used the money I earned from part-time jobs to travel to countries where the languages I had learned were spoken. Kyle, are you going on another trip? Where to this time? A friend asked me eagerly. Yes, I'm planning to visit Germany this time. I'm really interested in their culture and history, I replied. When I arrived in Germany, I found myself even more drawn to the language as I experienced the local streets and lifestyle. Interacting with the locals allowed me to discover the joy of learning living languages. One day, while chatting with a German friend at a cafe, he asked, "Your German is quite good. How long have you been studying?" "Just a few years, but speaking it here is incredibly fun," I responded. After that, I visited countries where the languages I had learned were spoken, such as Italy, Spain, and France. Experiencing the local cultures and traditions only deepened my desire to continue learning. Kyle, I heard you're learning French now too. You really can speak so many languages, a friend once remarked in admiration. Yes, I even went on a short-term study program to France. It helped me improve a lot, I replied. My time in France was a tremendous experience. I attended college classes, conversed with French friends, and learned new expressions and phrases. Living with a host family, I used French daily in practical situations, which sharpened my skills even further. Kyle, your French pronunciation is becoming quite natural, my host mother once complimented me. Thank you. I've learned so much. Thanks to all of you, I said, expressing my gratitude. With each journey and learning experience, I steadily improved. By my senior year of college, I had become proficient in Japanese, English, German, Italian, Spanish, and French, 6 languages in total. Kyle, you're truly amazing. I can't believe you can speak so many languages, a friend once said. Thank you. But there's still so much more to learn, I replied. I had already decided to keep learning new languages moving forward. Though I had gained valuable skills, the job hunting process was far more challenging than I had anticipated. I thought my ability to remain calm and collected during interviews would be an advantage, but it often backfired. Kyle, your credentials are impressive, but could you show a bit more enthusiasm? One interviewer once told me. I am passionate about this, But it doesn't always show outwardly, I explained, though my words didn't seem to change the interviewer's expression. Being calm is a good thing, but others likely perceive it as coldness or a lack of sincerity. From my past experiences, I understood this all too well. Teamwork and collaborating within an organization had always felt like a weak point for me. Maybe I'm better suited for working behind the scenes, I reflected. That's when the idea of becoming a secretary occurred to me. I thought supporting someone and working in the background might align with my personality. Being an executive assistant, it might not be a bad idea, I thought, and began looking through executive assistant job postings. When I came across the listing for an executive assistant position at Central Corporation, I felt a sense of destiny. My calm demeanor and language skills were recognized, and I successfully secured the position, becoming Mr. Yates's executive assistant. Even after starting my job, I continued studying languages. Learning new languages brought me immense joy. During our ride back to the office, Mr. Yates laughed heartily after hearing about my struggles during my school years. "You're such an interesting person, Kyle. I like you even more now." While I felt a little embarrassed inside, my expression remained the same as always, calm and composed. Mr. Yates seemed captivated by the story and continued his praise. "It's truly incredible that you've managed to master so many languages on your own. Plus, your composure is a tremendous asset. I'm so glad you're my executive assistant." Hearing his words, I smiled inwardly. "Thank you. But I still have much to learn." Mr. Yates nodded with satisfaction and continued. "Kyle, having someone like you is invaluable to the company. You've been such a great help to us." Grateful for his words, I kept driving without letting my emotions show outwardly. I'm just doing my best to contribute in any way I can. If that helps the company, then I'm happy. Mr. Yates nodded again, clearly pleased, and added, "I have high expectations for you, Kyle. I'm counting on you moving forward." Feeling slightly embarrassed inside but maintaining my usual calm expression, I replied, "Of course. I'll do my best to support you." Even after that, Mr. Yates continued praising me all the way to the office. Each time, I silently expressed my gratitude while calmly continuing to drive. By the time we arrived, I felt a newfound confidence and a deep sense of gratitude toward Mr. Yates. The next day, my inbox was flooded with emails from the participants of the previous meeting, apologizing for their behavior. Each email expressed regret for the emotional outbursts and a request to reschedule the meeting. "I'm truly sorry for what happened yesterday. I let my emotions get the better of me and disrupted the discussion. Could we please have another opportunity to meet?" Many of the emails also included comments about how my words had resonated with them. Kyle's words, "This discussion isn't just for us here," really struck a chord with me. I've realized I wasn't acting with the responsibility of a union representative in mind, and I deeply regret that. A new date was set, and the same participants gathered once again with a renewed purpose. This time, the atmosphere was calm and composed, reflecting the lessons learned from the previous session. We're determined to make up for our previous mistakes. Thank you for giving us another chance. The discussion progressed constructively, focusing on revising regulations and addressing concerns about the acquisition. The representatives proposed ideas and asked questions one after another, and Mr. Yates responded to each one with care. At Central Corporation, we prioritize our employees. No matter where they're from, we aim to provide an equally comfortable working environment. We will continue to review and improve as needed and value your input in this process. The meeting went smoothly, and a solid foundation for the new framework was established. Though there would still be adjustments and additions to make, the immediate goal was achieved. This moment marked not only a step forward for the negotiation but also the point where my calm demeanor and multilingual abilities earned the trust of everyone present. Today's discussion was incredibly productive. Kyle, it wouldn't have gone this smoothly without your support. Thank you so much. I responded to Mr. Yates's words with a quiet smile. Thank you as well. It was all thanks to everyone's efforts. I look forward to continuing to work together. With that, we took a significant step forward. Thanks to their cooperation, the company was steadily advancing. Sometime later, the business Central Corporation had acquired began to stabilize. The employees in that division were primarily from overseas, and as time passed, the differences in their cultures and values became more apparent. There are some aspects of Japanese work culture that don't quite align with us. One employee remarked. What specific issues are you facing? I asked. For example, how we take vacations and approach tasks. Things are more flexible back home, they explained. Though the complaints weren't numerous, they weren't entirely absent either. Whenever such concerns arose, Mr. Yates would listen earnestly. Please don't hesitate to share anything that will help improve your work environment. We're committed to being as flexible as possible. Following this policy, I engaged in direct dialogue with the workers. My communication skills proved invaluable as a bridge between different cultures. Kyle, thank you for always listening. Thanks to you, things feel like they're gradually improving. Such messages of gratitude became more frequent. As we worked on ongoing improvements, the efforts of Mr. Yates and I were yielding tangible results. The collaboration between people with different cultures and values continued to create a better workplace. One day, Mr. Yates called me to his office. When I knocked and entered, he was grinning as usual. Kyle, it's good to see you. If you hadn't stopped everyone's quarrel back then, who knows what would have happened? Don't you agree? He began. Thank you. I'm glad I could be of some help at that moment, I replied. Mr. Yates, still grinning, continued. You have excellent language skills, and you handle your duties as an executive assistant efficiently. I rely on you a great deal. Feeling slightly puzzled, I continued listening. To be honest, I think it's a waste to keep you just by my side. How about this? Our company has many departments. So why don't you rotate through them over a few years? Rotating through departments? That's an interesting suggestion. May I ask why? I inquired. Mr. Yates laughed heartily and replied, It's for learning. There's something I'd like you to do in the future. After a brief pause, I replied, Understood. If it helps me improve my skills, I'd be happy to take on the challenge. Wonderful. That makes me happy, he said enthusiastically. Then, with a grin, he added, One more thing, how about a matchmaking meeting? I was so stunned I couldn't form a reply. Excuse me? Mr. Yates continued. Well, there's someone inexperienced in matters of love. Her name is Alice. I was inwardly stunned beyond belief. Alice was Mr. Yates's daughter and the heiress of the company. Is he trying to groom me to become the next president? I thought, feeling a wave of panic. Noticing my reaction, Mr. Yates laughed. It seems you figured it out, he said. Hearing those words, I grew even more flustered. On the morning of the matchmaking meeting, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my tie. I hadn't slept well the night before due to nerves, and my eyes looked puffy. Adjusting my tie, I let out a deep sigh. I've never been in a relationship before, and now I'm suddenly having a matchmaking meeting with the president's daughter. I muttered to myself. Glancing back at the mirror, I noticed my face was distorted with nerves and flushed with embarrassment. Seeing that, I couldn't help but smile. Well, look at that. I can pull myself together when I need to. Muttering those words, I faced the mirror once again. To meet Mr. Yates's expectations, I resolved to shake off my inner doubts and face forward with a smile. Not succumbing to anxiety or fear, but trusting in my own abilities and moving forward. This was my new challenge. Taking a deep breath, I calmed my mind. Life presents us with various trials and encounters, each one a stepping stone for growth. I felt that this trial, too, was an important opportunity to take a step forward. Alright, let's go, I resolved silently, stepping away from the mirror. Believing I could overcome any obstacle, I took my first step toward a new journey. I didn't know what the future held. But I vowed to trust in my convictions and efforts, to keep looking ahead, and to keep moving forward. And so, a new story began. In my heart, I thought, it's the courage and actions of individuals that nurture connections between people and carve out a brighter future. 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 Future.